Hello, and welcome to Time to Talk. This episode is the first in a series where we sit down and talk about the letter entitled Emotional Sobriety. We discuss how we've seen things in the past and how we're growing to see things as we move forward. Links to the letter are in the description and comments below. There's a lot going on in life, yeah? A lot of changes, a lot of stuff happening.
Yeah.
At the time of this recording, there's a lot happening. There are blockages coming out, potentially other blockages going in. There's feelings of comfort and discomfort alike. There are feelings of ease and letting go, and then there's also potential forcings and the holdings of the tight. And it's all happening simultaneously. And that's a really cool part of this journey, is learning that all of this can happen at the same time. That different components of me, different pieces, are working simultaneously and not always in the same direction. And it becomes very confusing. Conflicted have you ever felt conflicted internally? Like, I feel this way, but I think this way,
I do.
Yeah. It said in this morning's reading that we seek for the comfort of material goods and various items, and that advertising is directed is created to make that happen. We are drawn away from the true source of inspiration by consumerism. And so I can only speak for myself. I developed false dependencies upon material goods, deitized them, because I felt empty, scared, fearful. I wasn't going to admit that I was empty, scared, or fearful. Was never going to admit that I was afraid. I was just, everybody's pissing me off, And I lived an entire life like that. An entire lifespan, an entire career devoted to the acquisition of material goods and unable to determine why I felt so empty all the time. Why was I so angry all the time? I could pretend, I could put on a smile as one of my masks, and I got pretty good at it, and I still put it on. I'd like to leave that mask behind, so I'm naming it, I'm calling it out. I'd put on the smile, the jokester, good time guy, but I was empty, empty. And just, it was like a void. And nature abhors a vacuum, right? Nature abhors a void. It'll fill it with whatever's next. So I got close to, I saw other people that appeared happy with material goods, and well, they're happy with that, so I could be happy with that too. I'm going to do what they do. That's exactly what I set out to do. Is, I see how happy you look, so I'm going to do those things. And along the way, I'm thinking, why is it that I'm just not happy? What am I doing wrong? Well, I walked into the trap of fulfilling myself with perishable goods. And I was attempting to value myself based upon a good, based upon an item. That was the trick, is having my show cards and pretending, to be the big shot, wearing that mask, refining that mask, and feeling so empty, So I learned, and how would I know any different? I learned that these masks are what make me happy, when the mask is the perception of happiness, because I'm putting on a happy face, when really I was miserable.
I think we can use anything to fill the hole. I started realizing how many different ways I filled the hole. And so I started thinking more about what the empty space was, not as much realizing that it could be a million different things.
Yeah.
So I quit. At some point in time, I started realizing the focus for me needed to shift from what I was trying to fill the hole with to why the hole's there.
Ooh. Oh. Cause and effect. What's going on? What's deep down inside of me that I don't want to look at, that I've neatly packed away deep down inside of me, that's creating a craving for acceptance and the appearance of, I don't know, high-horsedness?
I think the high-horsedness comes from the natural tendency with acquisition. Then I found out the higher the horse, the further the fall.
Mm-hmm. That is a fact.
Yeah.
Or at least I can relate to that.
Yeah. I actually started realizing, and still am, so much of it for me boiled down to acceptance. the roles I was playing and why, and all the things that come with that. Acceptance from family and friends and societal standards. And I never fit into those well. So, yes, there was all kinds of things. Just like I realized I beat myself up a lot. I had some standard in my head of, what good housekeeping was, what a good wife is, what a good mother is. And some of those things were taught to me, some of them just social influence, things you see on TV, family dynamics, yada, yada, yada. I started to question what were my standards and what were imposed standards and ones that I was choosing to live by because I wanted to be accepted.
So that brings us to our topic. This guy wrote a letter to a friend of his, and the title of the letter is Emotional Sobriety. So please refer to a former episode of Time to Talk where we read the letter. You can also find it. I found it myself after a gift of someone letting me know where to find it. I found it on a website called barracks.com. A link will be in the comments. So in the 50s, this guy named Bill Wilson, wrote a letter to a friend of his about his depression and what he had discovered about it and what he was doing about it. And somebody presented this letter to me and said, Google it. So I did. My understanding of of what we're about to talk about was so very small or non-existent. And this person had an understanding, and I could tell, and I wanted that understanding. So when somebody came to me and said, hey, Google this and check it out, I didn't take it as a suggestion. I take them as directions. Okay, if I want what you got, I'm going to do what you do. And that has been a very important lesson for me, because what was found at the other end of that Googling was this letter entitled Emotional Sobriety, of which I hope that we have a conversation about today. So the heading of this is the substance of a revealing letter which Bill Wilson wrote several years ago to a close friend who also had troubles with depression. The letter appeared in the Grapevine, which is a circular magazine, January 1953. So I'm imagining that this was written prior to 1953. I think that many oldsters who have put our AA booze cure to severe but successful tests still find they often lack emotional sobriety. Perhaps they will be the spearhead for the next major development in AA, the development of a much more real maturity and balance, which is to say humility, in our relations with ourselves, with our fellows, and with God.
In that first paragraph where it says, perhaps it will be the spearhead for the next major development in AA.
Ooh. It goes on to say the development of much more real maturity and balance, which is to say humility, in our relations with ourselves, with our fellows, and with God. Now, Bill Wilson uses the word God quite often. So for Bill Wilson, his higher power, a power greater than himself, a mysterious force in the universe that was somewhere doing something that he could not do, he called that God. That's his word for it. So for our listeners who don't appreciate that word, I understand. I understand. It's a power somewhere doing something that I cannot do. Bill Wilson liked to call it God. I have my own words for it. We might choose words like creator, energy, king of the universe, goddess, Mother Earth, nature. We can use any words we want. Segue. You were saying.
No, I like that. It seems to me that it speaks specifically about the booze cure. And I like that because I realized that when that obsession was lifted, it was like, and very quickly I realized I could go back to my old ways. It was between 7 and 8 months for me, and I was feeling better than I had ever remembered feeling in my life. And I went right back to it, pretty much. And that's where I got this. That's right where my wasn't a trigger and oh shit and what was I thinking? I had planned my relapse. I actually called a friend a couple days earlier because I bet I could do normal now. And of course, me being the good alcoholic that I am, I had to try more than one route of my favorite escapes. So tried both of those in quick succession within a week or two of each other. and realized how quickly I jumped right back on the crazy train, the insanity of it. In both cases, I was doing exactly the old behaviors in quick succession, and I'm talking quick succession within the full day of the drinking and the full day of the other thing. And sometime in there it occurred, it was now it's time to work on the stinking thinking that led to my drinking and the things that were previous to me finding my favorite escape route from life. So looking where I'm at now on the in the path of the program and reflecting, is it seems that there are natural transitions to this progression that, the founders of this spoke of from very early on. That's where our, the steps, the 12 steps, the 12 traditions, the 12 concepts, the 12 legacies, it grew as they grew, as they were able to process it and experience it and then share about what was happening to them, what they were trying, not only the books and the pamphlets that came from all of this, but they were completely open also about their failures and what didn't work and shared that with each other. And that the group conscience came in and realizing how important that was, that we can still fool ourselves. And, he's writing a letter about this and his issues and talking to other people about it and getting input on that. And that it keeps growing. And I think it alludes in this, and this would be, and I don't, how long after it had started, where it was in these things evolving and growing and more coming out of this process that they had tapped into, that he realized even then that were the spearheads for these next major developments, and that things keep developing and evolving and growing. And the big book's wonderful in no way, shape, or form. I wouldn't be here without that. The experience of that, the people that got the experience from that and shared it with me. But things grow from there. Every bit of that was culminated in a group conscience of 4 years or less of sobriety. It just kept growing. So it seems to me that this is a growing process. So I get keeping all these fundamental things, but let's not grab onto them so tight that these evolutions that come from these 12 steps happens and the things that can happen from that. I went way off on a tangent.
I don't believe there are too many tangents.
Yes, but I really liked that and talks about that in here for an overall before it gets into the issue of specifically emotional sobriety.
So Bill wrote this specifically for, or it seems to be specifically for a group of individuals who were afflicted with what he called alcoholism. And so he refers to the booze cure in the very first sentence of this letter. Do you believe that what this letter entails, is only meant for those afflicted with an alcohol problem? Like they can't control their drinking, or maybe other substances, or is it wider, or is there a broader spectrum than that?
I feel totally there's a broader spectrum.
Okay.
And that's what I started realizing when my usual escape of alcohol, that insanity of that drive was lifted, but realizing that was my main route. And it was someone that you had that same main route. And I like that they kept it to that. But do I believe I have applied it to other things in my life?
Yeah.
Things that were in less levels of insane than what that became. That was my peak insanity, I just think that the path leads to the undercurrent of it, and that you can get to the undercurrent of anything in your life with this path.
It's just like Bill uses the word God to describe his higher power. His pathway to that higher power was through his booze cure.
Yeah.
He had a challenge with drinking, and he found that he couldn't stop. He couldn't stop thinking about it, and when he finally did drink some, he couldn't stop. He found himself physically incapable of stopping on his own accord, which is the basis for his new life that this letter comes from.
It amazes me. Might not apply, but it just popped in my head. To the extent that we were able and capable to do that in our lives as alcoholics, that shows so much promise. It's unbelievable. If people live through this, there are no limits for what we can do.
I think anything that takes us to the point of desperation, no matter what it is. I don't know. Why did I do that again? Whatever it is. Is it drinking? Is it drugs? Is it sex? Is it stealing? Is it lying? Is it buying things? Is it, adrenaline? Is it whatever it is? Why did I do that again? I just can't understand why can I not do that? And that level of insanity is keep doing the same things and not understanding why am I doing it. I know it's injurious. Why am I keep doing it? So the one that Bill writes about is the booze cure, right? He's talking about Alcoholics Anonymous. But I believe that this level of emotional sobriety reaches far beyond alcohol. Alcohol was the substance which Bill describes as holding him prisoner, right? That's what held him captive. That was his substance of insanity. Other people may experience that level of insanity without a mood altering substance that they're aware of. It could be as simple as lying. Why can't I stop lying? Why can't I stop buying cars? Why am I unable to control myself when it comes to purses or candles or tools? These adolescent urges that so many of us have had for top approval, perfect security, and perfect romance, urges quite appropriate to age 17, proved to be an impossible way of life when we are at age 47 and 57. I read this letter for the very first time when I was 47, and I thought, they wrote it for me. They're talking about me. Why am I such a child? Why am I a man child trapped in a grown up body, but behaving like a child?
I've heard that we stop developing when we start picking up our escape, whatever our escape may be. My first escape was alcohol. Mm, actually, that is not true, I found out. But as far as things exterior to me and picking them up and putting them into my body, it was alcohol. That we stopped developing emotionally, spiritually at that time. And that totally makes sense for me because that's right where I was at when I got sober. I was 12 again, 12, 13 years old.
My experience is a little different, but exactly the same. If I get upset enough, which really I've learned means afraid enough, I will stand up, start moving my arms around, get big, move around strongly. I'll start speaking very loudly, maybe even yell. My face will turn red, and the potential to throw something or break something. What does that sound like to you?
An ape.
An ape.
An ape that gets mad in the
Yep.
forest and stomps and thumps and puffs out and hollers.
It's funny that you say that because that's what I used to think I looked like when I was behaving that way. I used to think I was a silverback gorilla.
Yeah.
I now come to realize that I was throwing a temper tantrum.
Mm.
I was throwing a temper tantrum. And who throws a temper tantrum?
Kids.
So, in this journey that this letter outlines, I did a little time travel experiment. And my earliest cognitive memory is at 2 years old. And that was my first traumatic experience. When I recall that experience and looking at it through an adult's perspective, it's not that big a deal. It's like that's so I neatly pack it away because that shouldn't be that big of a deal. The mistake I made was looking at it from an adult's perspective. When it happened to me at 2 years old, the correct perspective is that of a 2 year old. And how did that affect a 2 year old? So if a 2 year old has never felt a pinch, and a 2 year old is pinched for the first time, what's the pain scale? Is it a 1, a 3, a 5? Nope, it's a 10. It's the worst pain imaginable because there's nothing to compare it with. So when I recall this 2 year old traumatic event, even though, if I'm looking at it, I'm like, really, that's not that big of a deal. But to a 2 year old who had not experienced that level of fear and aggression before, it was a huge event. And it had huge lifelong lasting effects. Lifelong lasting effects. So it talks about age 17, and I can relate to that in terms of human relationships, but quite honestly, it goes back further than that in my experience. I can trace back this journey to age 2, but I'm getting the cart before the horse. That comes later in the letter.
I think that I relate that to when I started realizing what society standards I was living by, what taught standards I was living by when I was raised. Who I was without the constant chase of when am I going to drink, being under the effects of drinking, recuperating from it. When I got out of that cycle, I didn't realize how much time in the day there was. Started realizing, like, okay, instead of focusing on that, like, what should I be doing right now? Literally, in a house with a husband, 2 kids, and 2 dogs. And so, what roles I was in, what standards I had, why I wasn't happy, what was I running from? Because this was a family that I had left when I was dealing with this. Like, what was I running from? Still remembering standing there washing dishes, thinking, this is all I'm ever going to do in my life is wash dishes and do laundry. So I started thinking about what I was doing, what I wanted to do. What makes me happy? Instead of trying to escape what I was miserable about or the issues, what is it that brings me happiness and joy? And how I can look at things that I'm doing different. And a lot of my adolescent urges came from wanting to be accepted, wanting to be a good wife, a good mom. Before that, a good granddaughter, a good daughter. I got the abandonment issues, both my parents and, however those things worked out. But realizing so much of my underlying issues were wanting to be accepted, so I would fill whatever role was necessary at the time to be accepted by the people I was with. So when it talks about these urges that we have, the top approval, security, things like that, romance, not only was I wondering how I was chasing those things, I started wondering why I was chasing those things. And I realized that was a hole that I was also trying to fill.
Quite insightful. We can fill our gaping, vacuumous emptiness with anything.
Hmm?
Anything. Very interesting.
Yeah, I went through the thinking I was doing everything that in my mind I thought was being perfect isn't the word, but the best frickin' wife I could be and the best frickin' mom I could be, and still being like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it felt better, don't get me wrong. Like, I felt like I'm doing my responsibilities, being held accountable, hold myself accountable, and doing those things, but then it got to, now what? Since AA began, I've taken immense wallops in all these areas because of my failure to grow up emotionally and spiritually. My God, how painful it is to keep demanding the impossible. How very painful to discover, finally, that all along we have had the cart before the horse. Then comes the final agony of seeing how awfully wrong we have been, but still finding ourselves unable to get off the emotional merry-go-round. Yeah, I think I just talked about where I was at with that.
Mm-hmm. The merry-go-round. It's a nice image, right? I've taken my daughter to the merry-go-round, the carousel. And there's horses and lights and music and there's other kids and there's people and it's spinning and it's beautiful and fun. And it's a distraction from what's going on. Outside the carousel, the merry-go-round is, everything else. But if I get on the carousel, if I get on the merry-go-round and I start spinning around, I'm going to get dizzy. I'm going to be laughing. There's colorful lights and fun music. And the emotional merry-go-round for me is very similar to that. I'm getting on that merry-go-round, trying to forget what was really going on, not pay attention to how I was really feeling, what was going on inside of me, and I would put on those masks. I would be distracted by everything that's going on, and or what I could create, or to some extent, I still do this. I'll lose myself in movies. I talk about that quite often. How I would take myself out of reality by inserting myself into the electronic goodness of the Matrix, and just live there. I still do that. My attempt is to now find enriching materials, right? Things that I can learn from versus just mindless stuff. I don't want to talk bad about any genre, but I'm a product of what I take in. So if I take in whatever I'm consuming through my ears and my eyes and my mouth and my skin, that's what I become. So it talks about he's taking immense wallops in these areas. Yep, yeah, immense wallops. And those to me are maybe those are financial, maybe those are insert whatever here. I can relate to all of those, including the emotional wallops. Not feeling like I was worth anything, so having to put on a bigger show of who I'm going to pretend to be. Talks about his failure to grow up emotionally and spiritually, and how painful it is to keep demanding the impossible, and how very painful to discover finally that all along we've had the cart before the horse. That's a terrifying realization An absolutely terrifying realization. I remember I was standing near a fountain, talking with someone, just sharing some conversation, and an epiphany hit me. And I said to this person, all the money, the house, the cars, the things, they don't mean anything, do they? And this person simply looked up at me and shook their head no. Didn't say a word, just shook their head. And that was a very scary place to be. The realization that everything I was doing, everything that I valued, was not helping me. Well, everything that I valued was, in fact, quite opposite, was pulling me down. And in that moment, not knowing what to do about it. It's one thing to have a realization to say, "Oh, I've had this wrong. I've done this the wrong way. All of this is meaningless, and nothing I've done matters." Then what? I didn't know. Then what? Holy crap! What should I jump off the cliff? I'm at the jumping off point. I'm at the jumping off point when I realize that everything I've ever done has got me where I am, and I'm freaking miserable. I need help, and I don't know how to ask for help. I am not good at asking for help because I should be the one helping everyone else. That's what my life tells me, right? That's what all my previous masks, all my pretendings, my career was in telling others what to do. And now I'm the one that has to accept and learn, and I'm not ready for that. So her simple shake of the head, no, they don't mean anything. I had an emotional release. I exhaled, and I felt comfort in the realization that I'm onto something, but also extreme fear because what does that mean? Holy sh! What does that mean?
They all tend to be double-edged swords.
Oh my
Like,
God.
oh my gosh, this is awesome. Then, like, holy shit.
Yeah, this is terrifying. The unknown is terrifying.
Indeed. Yeah.
Yeah. But still finding ourselves unable to get off that merry-go-round. So even though I had that realization in that moment with that person who simply shook their head no, confirming what I was discovering, I didn't know what to do about it. So therefore, I kept doing what I was doing. And to some extent, I'll still do that today and not even realize it. It's so ingrained, some of these things, and it's only through the pain that results from these actions that I stop and say, okay, wait, that's not the goal of today. I'm trying to learn how to live a different kind of life, and what I've just done, the action that I performed has is causing suffering. So now I need to stop and look and learn from it, take it as a lesson, and it doesn't hurt so bad if I can learn from it.
I think it doesn't hurt so bad because we start recognizing things sooner. It's like when your shoes don't fit right, you start realizing it's rubbing long before there's a freaking blister and it's infected and da 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 da.
I was in joining the military. I went into the basic training. They put you through the clothing line where they throw a bunch of BDUs at you and throw glasses at you and throw boots at you. And they asked me what size boot I wear. In that moment of sleep deprivation, I couldn't remember what size boot I wore, so I said 11. I'm not an 11. So while they fit in the moment and I'm getting screamed at by the drill sergeants, I didn't say a word. I just took the boots back to the barracks and wore them. And several weeks in, I was on sick call because my toes were a bloody, stumpy mess. Um, because I wasn't willing to let anybody know that I had a problem until I couldn't walk anymore. Then they gave me a new set of boots. But the hard part was then there wasn't the several weeks of polish already ingrained in the leather, and I had to start over with polishing these new boots. So my boots weren't nearly as shiny as they should have been. So lots of push-ups were had. So if I'm to turn this into a usable story, when I did finally ask for help, not all the problems were relieved. There was still work to be done. There was healing to happen. Those were my toes and going to sick call. There was work to be done. I had to break in a brand new set of boots, and in the middle of basic training, when there's road marches every day and all these activities, that was not fun, breaking in a new pair of boots right in the middle when everybody else had already had their boots broken in. And because there I am comparing, and there wasn't enough polish on them, so my boots were never shiny enough. And I did a lot of push-ups and flutter kicks because of it. But then again, while that sucked, I got stronger and learned new ways to melt polish into my boots. Made a mess while doing it, trying to take some shortcuts. I remember heating a tin of Kiwi boot polish with a lighter with a lid on it and not realizing that it's going to expand, and that lid went ping, and along with a bunch of liquid boot polish in the latrine. There's a lot of cleaning to be done. So we're going to make messes along this journey of recovery, right? We're
That's
make,
hilarious.
Oh, yeah. A lot of push-ups to be had.
Tampons work the best.
We didn't have access to tampons in my barracks.
That was it. It was wonderful because it was easy go, $0.25 a piece, because people wanted tampons. They were too shy to go in and buy their own tampons.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Fear is a funny thing.
It sure is. But they're wonderful for shining boots. And they even got the handle. You just push it out about an inch.
Yeah.
Because you want to mush it first so it expands at the end. Yeah, it works perfectly.
We were using cotton balls.
Yeah.
Makes sense. We just didn't have the handles.
Mm-hmm. Nor the density of the cotton.
Oh, good gravy, what I learned today.
I like in that paragraph where it says how painful it was, or how painful it is to keep demanding the impossible in the cart before the horse. For me, I relate that to now, actually. Trying to maneuver others to the way I want it to be so that it doesn't affect my buttons inside.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, and I wonder if that's not what he's coming to here.
In his other writings, he talked about the director of the play. If everybody would just do what I ask them to, do what I tell them to, play their parts, everything would come off okay.
Yes.
And how angry we were when it just didn't.
Well, and it goes back to what I think I want. And it's okay to have my wants. And this is just where I'm at with it now. It's okay to have my wants and speak openly and be true to myself about what my wants are, what my needs are, because that's a practice and progress also. But not trying to maneuver or manipulate people or circumstances so that they curate to the way that I want them to be. So it's like the outcomes. Not just that, but maneuvering the outside and acquisition. Like, I'll be happy if, or I'll be happy when. And it's always something not now, and it's always something outside of myself that needs to be, in whatever way, shape, or form, maneuvered, shifted, built to, grown to, work more hours, save more money, get the shinier car, that, whatever. It's always not now, and it's always out there. That's demanding the impossible. And for me, what I realized is it's fun to think about those things, but I'm not paying a bit of attention to what's going on right now. So I'm never feeling happy if I'm never enjoying when I can be happy, which is just being in the moment, being present in the moment.
Yeah.
It's just, I think about sitting there with my family, and I can still do it with cigarettes to this day, and I recognize it. Sitting there playing cards with my family on a Saturday night. And it clicked in the back of my mind, go outside and have a cigarette. Leave the fun situation going on. Because in my mind it's real, and I'd feel better if, and not being there with that. And I was constantly doing that with any situation in my life, and not just because I usually had my whatever on board. And that's what I was going through life with, right? So I was never really there wondering when I'm going to have more, when this will be over so I can get to what I really want to do. Which for most of my life was not be bothered, not be bugged. Let me just sit and do what I want, when I want, how I want. And I maneuver any situation out there to get that. Didn't realize why I wasn't enjoying. So I went way around the horn on that. But that cart before the horse, the demanding the impossible, is maneuvering other people.
When I was learning about that, the cart before the horse, and I would ask the question internally and externally, why? Why would I do these things? Why do I want to change everything? Why would I want to mess everything up? Why? Explain it to me. Show me something to help me understand why I would want to do this. And the answer was so very simple and not at all what I wanted to hear. but it is what I needed to hear. And that answer was, do the work, and then you'll know. And that has been evident and true every step of this journey of self-realization and release and finding out what really matters, discovering what I'm meant for. Do the work, and then you'll know. Because I'm all, why would I do that? Explain it to me. Show me why. Well, how can I show you your results if you don't do the work? How can you show me what I will become unless I do the work and self-realize it?
Self-realization.
Yeah. Or acceptance of what my role really is. I've gone through life believing my role to be one thing, and not finding sorrow, finding emptiness. And then come to realize that my job is completely different. My role is completely different than anything I thought, even though little hints were along the way, in hindsight only. Do the work and then you'll know. I can't explain it to anyone other than you'll understand when you know. It'll make sense of why. And that's what I was told. That it's when you're in this chair, when you go through the work and understand, let go of these things that have held you down, because I had no idea that anything was holding me down. Once I did the work, then the realizations come of why I went through all that work. And it's totally worth it. Nothing has ever been more worth it that I've ever experienced. There's some close ones. Children jumping out of planes. There's been some exciting moments. There's been acquisitions, mergers, all kinds of things. But I would have never guessed. I would have never known. If I had written a list of things I expected to get out of this journey, I'd have cut myself short.
Indeed.
Indeed. Thank you so much for joining us. In this episode, we covered just the very beginning of a nice long letter. Stick around. Tune in as we continue this discussion about emotional sobriety together and with you. Have a wonderful day.